it does take me to a study that some of my colleagues at the Center for Public Health Law Research did a few years ago of 35 years of NIH grants, in which we tried to identify all the grants that actually studied the implementation or impact or the creation of a legal intervention for health. And in that period, just the most recent period, which we looked at, which was 2010 to 2014, there were 218,000 NIH grants given out to extramural researchers. And we found 247 that had to do with law in any way, that fit sort of the definition of public health law research. So, I don't think it takes much persuading for us to say that although we shouldn't have gotten all that money, that probably, there were more important questions in public health law than 247 out of 220,000 grants.
That's a pretty small percentage.
It's a tiny percentage, and I do think they're the bias. That's where you actually see the RCT bias having a really powerful effect. And I think a lot of our audience today are people who would like to do quasi-experimental studies using analytic tools and design methods for improving causal inference, but are wondering about how they actually build a career doing that when you have such an uphill battle with the largest health research funder there is. Now, I think part of our work is to be advocates for a change in that. And part of that argument is really a methodological argument. But I wonder if you two have any other thoughts about sort of the strategy of getting the funding to do this research, which you are so compellingly convincing on in terms of their validity.
I think the right at the start, we have to be as good as we can be in our research designs and in our methods. And it's not like we're doing second-class research or anything like that. It's like we need to understand research design better than the people that are just doing standard RCTs are really, Fisher worked this all out. This has been pretty cut and dried for decades and decades and decades on how to do RCTs. And they're important and they're great and they're wonderful and there are many scientists doing them. And I don't want to be quoted out of context saying somehow I'm against them. No, it's all wonderful. But we have really important questions for society that we need to address. We need to do the best science that we can do to stand up to that. And part of that is having that confidence as scientists when we're writing these proposals. And part of it is being smarter than the rest of them. And so let's just get back to randomization for a minute. A lot of people think randomization is some magic thing. And I guess in a way, it is a magic thing. It's great when it was first discovered. But the reason, let's get back to the reason why randomization is so great. And the reason that randomization is wonderful is because we know with surety exactly how people were assigned to the treatment versus control conditions. We firmly have that knowledge without bias if it's a properly implemented RCT, randomized controlled trial, right? But the important thing is that we know what that assignment mechanism is. Well, randomization, if you just step back for a minute, is just one assignment mechanism. And there are others that we have in studying laws where sometimes we know with surety, with essentially no measurement error, we know what the assignment mechanism is. For example, a lot of interventions, a lot of laws that give some benefit or give some condition to people based on their income level, but it runs only to $10,000 and then it's cut off. So everybody under 10,000 gets it. Everybody over 10,000 does not get it. It's not random assignment, but it's a fixed assignment mechanism. If we have something like that, we can directly do a regression discontinuity design study with very high causal inference, just as good as a randomized trial, because we know the assignment mechanism. So anyway, back to the larger question that you were raising, Scott. It's a little bit as, we have to be smarter, and we have to have the ability to stand back and argue back against these things when people are in their own smaller worlds, thinking simplistically RCTs are the only way to go, and we're just not going to pay attention to anything else.
Jeff, how do you help your mentees and postdocs navigate this kind of problem?
The question of how we try to change things from the top in terms of readjusting funding priorities so that the kinds of studies that we do say that use quasi-experimental methods are valued. One thing that we have to do is get out of our own small kind of balkanized world where we're just doing our own research, and really engage in conversations with people who are connected to the funding decisions and the funding announcements, and who actually have a mandate, say from Congress. NIMH, for example, has a mandate, and SAMHSA has a mandate to reduce suicide at the population level. You look at maybe some other areas of medicine where research in cancer and heart disease, these kinds of things have impacted the actual metrics at the population level. So you see mortality rates going down over time. That's partly due to better treatments, but it also has to do with public health interventions to improve health behaviors. And meanwhile, suicide has gone up in the last 2 decades, despite the federal government pouring billions of dollars into neuroscience to try to figure out what's happening in the brain when people engage in intentional self-injury. Well, so we could stand back and say, as epidemiologists, let's maybe put some of that focus, instead of trying to understand exactly what's going on in the brain, to just do what we could do to have not so many people dying, right? So let's because even if you came up with a magic molecule today to cure mental illness, let's say, and that is a strong vector in suicide, if you can't distribute it to the population because they're addicted, or they're in jail, or they don't want the treatment, or they're homeless, and we have all of these problems out there with service delivery, and they have a firearm in their hand, which is a huge thing. Means of suicide matters, and maybe we could do something to make sure that until the day comes when we don't have people inclined to harm themselves, that we have fewer of them that have this incredibly lethal killing technology in their hand at the time and don't get a chance to survive. So those are questions that the neuroscientists, they're frustrated, because they have envy of other areas like, cancer treatment and stuff. But we can point that out, and we can actually do some studies that we can put in the hands of policymakers that demonstrate what we do. And so that we have this conversation between evidence-based laws and policies and practice-informed research. So we're actually listening to policymakers, and we're asking the questions and addressing the questions that, if we get the answers to them, they're actually going to matter, rather than asking a question that, even if you get the answer, it's not going to move the needle on population health. So I think being out there as kind of a public intellectual and trying to talk to people about this and write essays and op-eds and things that you might not get rewarded for, in tenure promotion, matters, and we can do that more than we do.
Well, I think that you guys both have exemplified the potential in your careers for actually making a difference and for saving lives through information about policy that policymakers then take up and apply. And that, I think, to me, is the strongest thing that keeps me going. The idea that, well, the NIH may diss us to some degree, may not support us as much as we like, but we have a good reason to keep doing what we're doing. We have a good reason to keep going with that fight.